The morning of my gallbladder surgery, I kissed my husband goodbye at 5:30 a.m., grabbed my overnight bag, and headed to my Honda Civic in the driveway. What I didn't know was that my mother-in-law had spent the previous evening in our garage with a pair of wire cutters, ensuring I'd never make it to Phoenix General Hospital alive. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. 3 months earlier, everything seemed perfect. Marcus and I had just celebrated our second wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at Romano's, the same Italian place where he'd proposed. We were talking about starting a family, maybe buying a bigger house in Scottsdale. Life felt like it was finally falling into place after years of struggling to get by on our combined teacher salaries. That's when the stomach pains started. At first, I blamed it on stress. Being a high school English teacher in Phoenix meant long hours, difficult students, and parents who thought their precious children could do no wrong. The sharp, stabbing pain under my right rib cage would hit randomly throughout the day, doubling me over in the middle of teaching Shakespeare to bored sophomores. Marcus noticed I'd stopped eating my favorite foods. Pizza became my enemy. Even a simple grilled cheese sandwich would send me rushing to the bathroom, clutching my side and fighting waves of nausea. After 2 weeks of this, he practically dragged me to Dr. Patterson's office. Classic gallbladder. Symptoms, Dr. Patterson said, reviewing my ultrasound results. We'll need to remove it laparoscopically. It's a routine procedure, but you'll need someone to drive you home and stay with you for the first 24 hours. That's when Patricia got involved. Marcus's mother had been living in our guest room for 6 weeks, supposedly while she looked for her own apartment after her divorce from Marcus's father. What started as a temporary arrangement had stretched into an indefinite stay, with Patricia showing no signs of actually house hunting. Patricia Hendricks was the kind of woman who smiled sweetly while sliding the knife between your shoulder blades. At 62, she maintained the appearance of a perfect suburban grandmother, perfectly coiffed silver hair, coordinated outfits from Chico's, and a voice that dripped honey even when she was delivering insults disguised as concern. "Oh, Sarah, darling," she'd say, watching me struggle to button my jeans after another painful episode. "Maybe this surgery is a blessing in disguise. You could stand to lose a few pounds anyway." Or when Marcus mentioned taking time off work to care for me after the surgery. "Don't be silly, sweetheart. I'm here to take care of Sarah. You shouldn't miss work for something so minor." The thing was, Patricia had been a nurse for 30 years before retiring. She knew exactly how to position herself as the helpful, knowledgeable caregiver while making me feel like an inconvenient burden. 2 weeks before my surgery, things escalated. I came home from school to find Patricia in our bedroom, going through my dresser drawers. She claimed she was organizing and had noticed how cluttered everything had become. When I politely asked her to please not touch my personal belongings, her mask slipped for just a moment. "This is my son's house too, Sarah. I'm just trying to help maintain some standards." Marcus wasn't there to witness these moments. Patricia had a supernatural ability to time her passive-aggressive attacks for when he was at football practice or parent conferences. By the time he got home, she was back to being the sweet, helpful mother-in-law, bringing him his favorite cookies and asking about his students. The breaking point came 5 days before my surgery. I'd scheduled the procedure for a Friday morning, so I'd have the weekend to recover before returning to work. Marcus had arranged to take the day off, despite Patricia's protests. We'd agreed that she would go stay with her sister Linda in Tucson for the weekend to give us some quiet recovery time. But Patricia had other plans. "I've been thinking," she announced over dinner, "and I really should be here when Sarah comes home from surgery. What if something goes wrong? What if she has complications? Marcus, you're not trained to handle medical emergencies." I watched my husband's resolve crumble in real time. The guilt trip was masterful. Patricia painted herself as the responsible adult preventing potential disaster, while making Marcus feel inadequate and me feel like a medical time bomb. "Mom, I think Sarah and I can handle it, Marcus said weakly, but I could see him wavering. Of course you can, sweetheart. But why take unnecessary risks when I'm right here? I've assisted with countless surgeries. I know what to watch for. That night, lying in bed listening to Marcus's heavy breathing, I made a decision that probably saved my life. I was going to drive myself to the hospital. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than having Patricia hovering over me during my most vulnerable moments, finding new ways to make me feel inadequate. I could take an Uber home if necessary, or ask my friend Jennifer to pick me up. Anything was better than owing Patricia for her selfless care. I didn't tell Marcus about my plan. I knew he'd worry, and frankly, I was tired of every decision. In our house becoming a negotiation with his mother. This was my body, my surgery, and my choice. The night before my surgery, Patricia was unusually helpful. She offered to do my laundry, insisted on making my favorite lasagna for dinner, and even helped me pack my overnight bag. She seemed almost cheerful, humming old Broadway tunes while she folded my clothes. You should get a good night's sleep. Dear, she said, patting my shoulder with what felt like genuine affection. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. I should have recognized the satisfaction in her voice. I should have questioned why she was suddenly so accommodating. Instead, I went to bed feeling grateful that maybe, finally, Patricia was accepting me as part of the family. At 5:15 a.m., my alarm buzzed softly. I'd hidden my phone under my pillow to avoid waking Marcus. The house was completely silent as I slipped out of bed, grabbed my pre-packed bag, and tiptoed toward the kitchen. I left a note on the counter. Decided to drive myself. Didn't want to wake you so early. We'll call when I'm out of surgery. Love you. Sigh. The garage door opener seemed impossibly loud in the pre-dawn quiet, but no lights came on in the house. I backed out of the driveway slowly, pleased with how smoothly my plan was working. Route 17 toward downtown Phoenix was nearly empty at 5:45 a.m. I had my favorite playlist going softly, and despite my nerves about the surgery, I felt good about taking control of the situation. No drama, no Patricia commentary, just me handling my own medical care like the adult I was. The first sign something was wrong came as I approached the merge onto Interstate 10. I pressed the brake pedal to slow, down for the car in front of me, and nothing happened. I pressed harder. Still nothing. My heart rate spiked as I pumped the pedal frantically, feeling it go all the way to the floor with zero resistance. The speedometer showed I was still doing 55 miles per hour, heading straight for the back of a semi-truck, hauling what looked like construction equipment. I yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, tires screaming as I swerved into the next lane. A white pickup truck laid on its horn as I cut directly in front of it, missing its front bumper by inches. The emergency brake. I grabbed the handle and pulled as hard as I could, feeling the car shudder and slow slightly, but not nearly enough. I was still doing 40 miles per hour with no way to stop, weaving between cars as other drivers honked and swerved to avoid me. That's when I saw the concrete barrier approaching fast. Time slowed down in that terrifying way it does when your brain realizes you're about to die. The concrete barrier rushed toward me at 40 miles per hour, while I desperately searched for options that didn't exist. I aimed for the narrow shoulder between the highway and the barrier, praying the rough gravel would create enough friction to slow me down. The Honda bounced violently as it hit the uneven surface, and I fought to keep control as rocks pelted the undercarriage like machine gun fire. The car finally came to rest against the concrete wall with a sickening crunch of metal and plastic. Steam hissed from under the crumpled hood, and my hands shook so badly I couldn't unbuckle my seatbelt. An Arizona Department of Transportation worker named Miguel was the first to reach me. He'd been setting up orange cones for a construction zone when he saw my car careening across 3 lanes of traffic. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Can you move your arms and legs?" I took an inventory of my body. My chest ached from the seatbelt, and I had a small cut on my forehead from where my head had bounced off the side window, but everything seemed to work. I think I'm okay, I managed to say. My brakes failed. They just stopped working. Within minutes, the scene was controlled. Chaos. Phoenix Fire Department paramedics checked my vital signs while a police officer took my statement. A tow truck driver examined my mangled Honda and shook his head. "Lady, you're lucky to be alive. These concrete barriers don't usually give this much." Officer Janet Rodriguez was thorough and professional as she documented everything. When I explained that my brakes had completely failed without warning, she made a note to have the vehicle inspected. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. We'll need to determine if this was mechanical failure or... She paused, studying my face carefully. Something else. Something else. The phrase sent a chill down my spine. The paramedics wanted to take me to the hospital, but not for my surgery. They were concerned about possible concussion and internal injuries from the crash. I tried to explain that I was supposed to be in surgery in 2 hours, but they were more worried about trauma from the accident. "Mrs. Hendricks, you've been in a serious collision. Your gallbladder can wait. We need to make sure you don't have any life-threatening injuries." By 8 a.m., I was in the emergency room at Phoenix General, the same hospital where I should have been prepping for surgery. Instead, I was getting CT scans and X-rays while Dr. Patterson's surgical team wondered where I was. Marcus arrived looking frantic and confused. He'd found my note and tried calling, but my phone had been destroyed in the crash. "Sarah, what happened? Why didn't you wake me up? I don't understand why you drove yourself." I explained about wanting to avoid Patricia's overwhelming helpfulness, about needing to feel some control over my own medical care. Marcus looked hurt. But before he could respond, Officer Rodriguez appeared in the doorway of my emergency room cubicle. "Mrs. Hendricks, I need to ask you some questions about your vehicle. The preliminary inspection has raised some concerns." She pulled out a small notebook and sat down in the plastic visitor chair. "When was the last time you had your brakes serviced?" "About 6 months ago. I always take it to Rodriguez Auto on Camelback Road." I paused, realizing the irony of the shared surname. "They're very reliable. Have you noticed any problems with your brakes recently? Any grinding, squealing, or soft pedal feel?" "Nothing. They were fine yesterday when I drove home from school." "Officer?" Rodriguez made notes, then looked up with an expression I couldn't read. "Mrs. Hendricks, our preliminary examination suggests your brake lines may have been deliberately cut." The words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus went pale. "Cut? You? Mean someone tried to kill my wife?" "We're still investigating, but it appears the brake lines were severed cleanly, likely with wire cutters or similar tool. This wasn't wear and tear or mechanical failure." My mind raced through possibilities. Who would want to hurt me? I was a high school English teacher. My biggest enemies were students who didn't want to read To Kill a Mockingbird and parents who thought their children deserved A's for minimal effort. Then, a horrible thought crept into my consciousness. Patricia had been unusually helpful the night before. She'd insisted on doing things that would give her access to the garage. She'd seemed almost cheerful, humming while she helped me pack. But that was insane. Patricia was passive-aggressive and difficult, but she wasn't a murderer. Was she? Officer Rodriguez continued her questions. "Who has access to your garage? Who knew you'd be driving early this morning?" I looked at Marcus, seeing the same terrible realization dawning on his face. "My mother-in-law is staying with us," I said slowly. "She knew about the surgery, but I didn't tell anyone I planned to drive myself." "What's her name?" "Patricia Hendricks. She's been living in our guest room for about 6 weeks." Officer Rodriguez wrote this down carefully. "We'll need to speak with her. Is she at your home now?" Marcus nodded, looking like he might be sick. She was sleeping when I left to come here. We'll send officers to your house to interview her and examine the garage for evidence. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of medical tests, police questions, and rescheduled surgery appointments. My gallbladder would have to wait until the following week while my accident injuries healed. By noon, my test results were clear. No concussion, no internal injuries, just bruises and the cut on my forehead that needed 3 stitches. I was discharged with instructions to rest and follow up if I experienced any dizziness or nausea. Marcus drove me home in his pickup truck, both of us lost in our own thoughts. The garage door was open, and I could see investigators taking photographs and collecting samples. Detective William Chen met us in the driveway. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with kind eyes and the calm demeanor of someone used to delivering bad news. Mrs. Hendricks, we've completed our preliminary investigation of your vehicle and garage. I need to inform you that we found evidence consistent with deliberate sabotage. He showed us photographs of my brake lines, clean cuts visible in the rubber tubing. These were severed sometime between yesterday evening and early this morning. The cuts were made with precision. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. "Where is Patricia?" Marcus asked quietly. "That's what I need to discuss with you." When officers arrived this morning to interview Mrs. Patricia Hendricks, they found the house empty. Her belongings are gone, and neighbors reported seeing her load suitcases into her car around 7 a.m. She'd run, while I was fighting for my life. On Interstate 10, while Marcus was panicking about my accident, while emergency responders were scraping my car off a concrete barrier, Patricia had calmly packed her bags and disappeared. We've issued a BOLO alert for her vehicle, a 2019 silver Toyota Camry, Arizona license plate. Detective Chen consulted his notes. BXR 4429. We've also contacted the Tucson Police Department, since you mentioned she has a sister there. Marcus sank onto our front porch steps, holding his head in his hands. I don't understand. Why would she? Sarah never did anything to her. But even as he said it, I could see him remembering things, the constant criticism disguised as concern, the way Patricia positioned herself as the indispensable caregiver while making me feel like a burden, the territorial behavior around our home and our marriage. Detective Chen's radio crackled with static and indistinct voices. He stepped away to take the call, then returned with news that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Hendricks, we just got a call from Rodriguez Auto, the shop where you have your brakes serviced. The owner remembers your mother-in-law bringing your car in 3 weeks ago, claiming you'd asked her to get an oil change while you were at work. 3 weeks ago. Right, after we'd scheduled my surgery date. She specifically asked the mechanic to show her how the brake system worked, Detective Chen continued. Said she was curious about car maintenance. The mechanic thought it was unusual, but she was very charming and seemed genuinely interested in learning. Patricia had been planning this for 3 weeks. While I was worrying about my health and preparing for surgery, she was researching how to kill me. The next 72 hours felt like living in a nightmare that refused to end. Every phone call could be news about Patricia's capture. Every unexpected sound made me jump. Every time Marcus left for work, I wondered if she'd come back to finish what she started. Detective Chen had assigned a patrol car to drive by our house every few hours, but Phoenix PD couldn't provide round-the-clock protection for an attempted murder case where the suspect had fled. I was essentially on my own, recovering from a car crash while waiting for my homicidal mother-in-law to surface. Marcus took the rest of the week off from school, partly to take care of me, and partly because he was falling apart. The man I'd married was confident and decisive, but discovering his mother had tried to murder his wife had shattered something fundamental in him. I keep thinking about signs I missed, he said on Wednesday evening, staring at his untouched dinner. She was different after Dad left her, angry, but I thought she was just hurt and needed time to adjust. I'd been thinking about signs, too. The way Patricia's eyes would go flat when she smiled. How she'd appear in doorways without making a sound, as if she'd been listening to our conversations. The subtle ways she'd undermined my confidence and made me feel like an outsider in my own home. "She asked me about your life insurance policy last month," Marcus admitted suddenly. "I thought she was just being practical, making sure we had our finances in order. But now, the life insurance. Of course, if I died in that crash, it would have looked like a tragic accident. Marcus would have inherited everything, and Patricia would have positioned herself as the grieving mother-in-law who'd stepped in to help her devastated son through his loss." Thursday morning brought the first break in the case. Detective Chen called while I was attempting to eat breakfast despite my persistent nausea from the painkillers. "We found her car," he announced, "abandoned in a long-term parking lot at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. She's likely using an alias to travel, but we're working with TSA to review security footage." An hour later, he called back with more news. "We got a hit from the airport footage. A woman matching Patricia's description boarded a Southwest flight to Dallas at 2:15 p.m. Monday afternoon, less than 7 hours after your accident. She was using the name Linda Morrison." Linda Morrison. Patricia's sister Linda lived in Tucson, and Morrison was Linda's married name before her divorce. Patricia had clearly been planning her escape route as carefully as she'd planned the murder attempt. "Dallas was just a layover," Detective Chen continued. "She connected to a flight bound for Atlanta. We're coordinating with Georgia authorities. Now, Atlanta." Patricia had grown up in Georgia before moving to Arizona 30 years ago to marry Marcus's father. She probably still had connections there, people who might help her hide. Friday brought devastating news that changed everything. Marcus's phone rang at 6 a.m., and I watched his face go white as he listened. "It's Linda," he whispered, covering the phone. "Patricia's sister." I could hear Linda crying on the other end of the line, her voice high and panicked. Marcus put the call on speaker. "Marcus, honey, I'm so sorry. I should have called sooner, but I was scared." Patricia showed up at my house Tuesday night, completely out of her mind. She was talking crazy, saying Sarah had stolen you from her, that you'd never love anyone the way you loved your mother. My skin crawled. Patricia hadn't just been jealous of me as Marcus's wife. She'd been competing with me for his affection in a way that was deeply disturbed. She kept saying Sarah was going to ruin everything, that she had to stop her before it was too late. I tried to calm her down, but she was drinking and getting more agitated. She said she'd already taken care of the problem. Linda sobbed openly. I didn't understand what she meant until I saw the news about Sarah's accident. Patricia laughed when she saw it on TV, Marcus. She actually laughed and said, "One way or another, that girl won't be around much longer." The implications hit me like ice water. Even after the brake sabotage had failed, Patricia wasn't done. She was still planning to kill me. "Where is she now?" Marcus asked, his voice barely controlled. "Gone." She left Wednesday morning after seeing that Sarah survived. She was furious. Marcus, absolutely furious. She kept mumbling about how she'd have to try a different approach. Detective Chen arrived within an hour of Linda's call. The case had escalated from attempted murder to active threat, and Patricia's words to her sister proved this wasn't over. "We're treating this as an ongoing threat to your safety," he explained. "Mrs. Hendricks, I strongly recommend you consider staying somewhere else until we apprehend Patricia." But I was tired of running, tired of being afraid in my own home, tired of letting Patricia's madness control my life. "What if we set a trap?" I asked. Both Marcus and Detective Chen stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Sarah?" "Absolutely not," Marcus said immediately. "She's already tried to kill you once. But she failed, and now she's desperate. She knows the police are looking for her, but she also knows she can't hide forever. Sooner or later, she's going to try again." Detective Chen leaned forward, suddenly interested. "What did you have in mind?" She's obsessed with Marcus, with controlling him. If she thinks I'm vulnerable and alone, she might take the risk to come back and finish what she started. The plan we developed over the next few hours was risky, but sound. I would return to my normal routine, going back to work, running errands, acting like someone who felt safe because the suspect had fled the state. Marcus would visibly go, out of town for a weekend teachers' conference in Flagstaff, leaving me apparently alone and unprotected. In reality, I'd be wearing a wire and GPS tracker, with undercover officers positioned around our neighborhood. Detective Chen would be in an unmarked car 2 blocks away, ready to respond within minutes. If she makes contact, don't try to be a hero, Detective Chen warned. Keep her talking, stay calm, and trust that we'll be there. Marcus hated the plan, but he understood it might be our only chance to end this nightmare. Patricia was too smart to stay hidden indefinitely, and her obsession with him would eventually drive her to take another shot at removing me from his life. On Sunday evening, Marcus loaded his overnight bag into his pickup truck with exaggerated visibility, kissing me goodbye on the front porch where any watching eyes could see. He drove toward Flagstaff but doubled back to a safe house the police had arranged, where he could monitor everything through radio contact. I spent Sunday night in my empty house, jumping at every sound. The undercover officers had assured me Patricia couldn't approach without being seen, but knowing someone wanted me dead made every shadow threatening. Monday morning, I returned to Roosevelt High School for the first time since the accident. My students had heard about the crash and were unusually well behaved, probably expecting me to be fragile and emotional. If only they knew their English teacher was bait in a trap for a would-be murderer. During lunch, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Marcus deserves better than you. He always has. My hands shook as I forwarded the message to Detective Chen. She was close. After 4 days of hiding, Patricia was ready to make her move. The response came within minutes. Game time. Stay alert and trust the plan. The text message changed everything. Patricia wasn't just hiding anymore. She was actively stalking me, watching my movements, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. I finished teaching my afternoon classes, on autopilot, hyper-aware of every face in the hallway, every car in the parking lot, every sound that didn't belong. The wire taped to my chest felt heavy and obvious, even though Detective Chen had assured me it was completely invisible. At 3:30 p.m., I walked to my rental car, a blue Ford Focus that looked nothing like my destroyed Honda. The insurance company had been surprisingly understanding about covering a vehicle damaged in an attempted murder, though they'd never encountered a claim quite like mine before. The drive home felt like traveling through enemy territory. Every silver sedan could be Patricia in a different car. Every woman with gray hair at a bus stop or traffic light made my pulse spike. She could be anywhere, watching, planning her next move. My phone rang as I pulled into the driveway. Unknown number again. Hello? Silence. Then breathing. Then Patricia's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. You should have died on that highway, Sarah. I fumbled for the panic button Detective Chen had given me, but Patricia continued before I could press it. Do you have any idea how much planning went into that morning? How carefully I timed everything? You were supposed to crash during rush hour, when traffic was heavy enough to cause a real accident. Multiple casualties. No one would have questioned brake failure in a pileup like that. My blood turned to ice. She hadn't just tried to kill me. She'd been willing to murder innocent strangers to cover her tracks. But you had to be different. Didn't you? Had to leave early? Drive yourself? Ruin everything with your stubborn independence? I managed to find my voice. Patricia, why? What did I ever do to deserve this? Her laugh was sharp and bitter. You married my son. You moved into the house I helped him buy. You sleep in the bed where I used to read him stories when he was sick. You took everything that was mine. The psychological profile Detective Chen had shared with me suddenly made terrible sense. Patricia wasn't just jealous of me as Marcus's wife. She had an unhealthy, possessive attachment to her adult son that bordered on pathological. "Marcus loves you," I said carefully, remembering Chen's advice to keep her talking. "You're his mother. That will never change." "Love?" Patricia's voice rose to nearly a shriek. "He barely calls me anymore. Before you came along, we talked every day. We had dinner twice a week. He told me everything about his work, his dreams, his plans. Now he tells you those things instead." I was walking toward my front door, keys ready, but my hands were shaking. So badly I couldn't get them into the lock. Patricia's voice in my ear was making it hard to think clearly. "He used to need me, Sarah. When his father left, Marcus was lost and broken, and I was the one who put him back together. I was the one who helped him become the man you claim to love. And this is how he repays me? By choosing some mediocre schoolteacher over his own mother?" The lock finally turned and I stumbled into the house. Through the kitchen window, I could see the unmarked police car positioned discreetly down the street. Help was close, but Patricia's psychological warfare was more disturbing than any physical threat. "I know you're listening, Marcus," she continued, and I realized she understood this call was being monitored. "I know the police have you tucked away somewhere safe while they use your wife as bait. Does it hurt, baby boy? Knowing that she's willing to risk her life just to see your mother destroyed?" A new fear gripped me. Patricia wasn't just trying to hurt me anymore. She was trying to destroy my marriage by making Marcus feel guilty for the trap we'd set. "This isn't about Marcus," I said firmly. "This is about you trying to murder me." Murder is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as removing an obstacle. Marcus was happy before you came along. He had a good relationship with his mother, a stable life, clear priorities. You've confused him, turned him against his own family. I moved through the house systematically, checking locks and closing blinds while Patricia continued her delusional monologue. The GPS tracker in my pocket felt like a lifeline, but I knew Detective Chen needed more time to trace the call. "Where are you, Patricia?" I asked. "Still hiding in Georgia? Or did you come back to finish what you started?" "Closer than you think, sweetheart. Close enough to see that rental car in your driveway. Close enough to know that Marcus isn't really in Flagstaff like he wants everyone to believe." My heart stopped. She was here, somewhere in the neighborhood, watching the house. "You're surrounded by police," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Turn yourself in before this gets worse." "Police?" Patricia laughed. "You mean that obvious unmarked car with Detective Chen sitting inside checking his phone? Or the jogger who's been circling the same 3 blocks for 40 minutes? Or maybe the utility worker who's been examining the same telephone pole since noon?" She'd identified all the surveillance. Worse, she was taunting them, proving she was smarter and more prepared than anyone had anticipated. "Here's what's going to happen, Sarah. You're going to walk out your front door and get in that little blue rental car. You're going to drive to Desert Ridge Marketplace and park in the northwest corner of the parking lot, near the Barnes & Noble. Come alone or I start shooting random shoppers until the police back off." The line went dead. I stood frozen in my living room, phone in hand, mind racing through impossible choices. If I followed Patricia's instructions, I was walking into a trap with no backup. If I didn't, innocent people would die. My phone buzzed with Detective Chen's number. "Sarah, we traced the call to a prepaid cell tower near Desert Ridge. She's mobile, probably in a vehicle. We're repositioning units now, but I need you to stay put until—" "She knows about all your surveillance," I interrupted. "She identified every officer you have positioned around here, and she's threatening to shoot random people at Desert Ridge if I don't meet her alone." Static crackled on the line as Chen consulted with his team. "We can't let you go in alone, but we can't ignore a threat against civilians either. Give us 30 minutes to get plainclothes officers into the mall. We'll have you covered, but it won't be obvious." 30 minutes felt like an eternity when a madwoman was threatening mass casualties. But it was our only chance to end this without innocent blood on our hands. As I waited, my phone buzzed with text messages from Patricia, each one more disturbing than the last. Marcus cried for 3 hours the night his father left. I held him while he sobbed. I taught him to drive in the parking lot behind his high school. I was the one who helped him pick out your engagement ring. Isn't that ironic? He'll get over losing you faster than you think. He got over losing his father. The psychological manipulation was as calculated as the brake sabotage had been. Patricia understood exactly how to weaponize a mother's knowledge of her son against the woman who'd married him. 28 minutes after Chen's call, my phone rang again. Time's up, sweetheart. Desert Ridge, Northwest parking lot. Now. I grabbed my keys, checked that the GPS tracker was secure in my pocket, and walked out into what might be the last afternoon of my life. Desert Ridge Marketplace on a Monday evening was busier than I'd expected. Families with young children headed to dinner, teenagers clustering around the outdoor fountain, elderly couples window shopping, all these innocent people going about their normal lives, unaware that a woman with nothing left to lose was somewhere among them with a gun. I parked in the northwest corner as instructed, near the Barnes & Noble but far enough from the main pedestrian areas to minimize collateral damage if things went wrong. My hands were steady now, the kind of unnatural calm that comes when you've moved beyond fear into pure survival mode. The GPS tracker in my pocket felt warm against my hip. Detective Chen and his team were out there somewhere, but Patricia had already proven she could spot surveillance from a distance. I was essentially on my own until she revealed herself. My phone buzzed. Get out of the car. Walk toward the bookstore. Keep your hands visible. I stepped into the Arizona heat, scanning the parking lot for any sign of Patricia or her new vehicle. The sun was low enough to create long shadows between the cars, perfect cover for someone who wanted to stay hidden. Turn around. I spun toward the voice, and there she was, standing behind a large SUV about 30 feet away. Patricia looked different. Her usually perfect hair was unkempt, her coordinated outfit replaced by jeans and a dark hoodie, but her eyes held the same cold calculation. I'd seen that morning she'd helped me pack for surgery. In her right hand, she held a small revolver pointed directly at my chest. Hello, Sarah. You look well for someone who should be dead. Patricia, please. We can work this out. Whatever issues you have with me, we can talk through them. Talk? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I tried talking. I tried being patient while you slowly poisoned my son against me. But talking doesn't work with someone who's determined to destroy a family. She took a step closer, and I noticed her left hand was shaking slightly. Whatever medication or alcohol she'd been using to cope was wearing off, making her even more unpredictable. Do you know what Marcus said to me the last time we spoke? Patricia's voice carried across the parking lot, drawing curious glances from shoppers walking nearby. He said I needed professional help. Can you imagine? After everything I sacrificed for that boy, he wants to lock me away in some psychiatric facility. That's not what he meant. Don't lie to me. The gun wavered as her voice rose. I know exactly what he meant. I know because you put those words in his mouth. Before you came along, Marcus respected his mother. He valued my opinions. Now, he treats me like a crazy old woman who's lost touch with reality. A young mother with a stroller was walking in our direction, oblivious to the drama unfolding. Patricia noticed her too and swung the gun toward the innocent woman. Tell her to leave, Patricia commanded. Now. Ma'am, I called out as calmly as possible. There's a gas leak over here. You need to go back toward the main entrance. The woman looked confused but turned around, pushing her stroller quickly away from us. Crisis averted, for now. Smart girl, Patricia said, refocusing the weapon on me. See how easy it is to protect people when you actually care about their well-being? It's a shame you never extended that same courtesy to my family. I love Marcus. I've never tried to come between you two. Love? Patricia's face contorted with rage. You don't know the meaning of the word. Love is sacrifice. Love is putting someone else's needs before your own. Love is spending 32 years raising a child, guiding him, protecting him from making mistakes that could ruin his life. The psychological profile was playing out exactly as Detective Chen had predicted. Patricia's definition of love was possession and control, not the healthy independence that actual love requires. Marcus is happy, I said, trying a different approach. Isn't that what mothers want for their children? For them to be happy? He was happy, before you convinced him he needed to choose between his wife and his mother. Before you made him feel guilty for caring about the woman who gave him life. A mall security guard was approaching from the east, probably responding to reports of the raised voices. Patricia saw him too and adjusted her position to keep the gun hidden from his view while maintaining her aim at me. Wave him off, she ordered. Tell him everything's fine. I raised my hand toward the security guard and called out, just a family discussion. Everything's okay here. The guard hesitated, clearly sensing something wasn't right, but he was too far away to see the weapon. After a moment, he spoke into his radio and continued his patrol, though I noticed he stayed within visual range. Where do you want this to end, Patricia? I asked. Even if you kill me, do you think Marcus will forgive you? Do you think he'll welcome you back into his life after you murder his wife? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. He'll understand eventually. When the grief passes, he'll realize I did this to protect him from making a terrible mistake. The only mistake Marcus will realize he made was not recognizing how dangerous you'd become. The words hit their target. Patricia's face went white with fury, and I saw her finger tighten on the trigger. You arrogant little— Patricia Hendricks, drop your weapon! Detective Chen's voice boomed across the parking lot through a megaphone. I could see police officers emerging from positions behind cars and storefronts, all with weapons drawn and pointed at Patricia. She spun around wildly, realizing she was completely surrounded. The careful trap she thought she'd set had become her own cage. I should have known, she said, turning back to me with a bitter smile. Even now, even facing death, you're still manipulating the situation to your advantage. This isn't manipulation, Patricia. This is justice. She raised the gun again, but her hands were shaking badly now. Maybe I can't have my son back, but I can make sure you never get to keep him. Patricia, don't! The gunshot echoed across the shopping center, sending shoppers screaming and diving for cover. I felt a burning sensation in my left shoulder and realized I'd been hit, but I was still standing, still conscious. Patricia wasn't. Detective Chen's sniper had taken the shot from his position on the Barnes & Noble roof the moment Patricia's finger moved toward the trigger. She lay motionless behind the SUV, the revolver several feet from her outstretched hand. Paramedics reached me within minutes, treating the bullet wound that had torn through muscle and tissue but missed any vital structures. As they worked, Detective Chen filled me in on what had happened behind the scenes. We had you covered from 6 different positions, including 2 snipers. The moment she raised that weapon with intent to fire, we had no choice. Marcus arrived at the hospital before they'd finished stitching up my shoulder. He looked older, somehow, aged by the trauma of discovering his mother's true nature and nearly losing his wife to her madness. Is it really over? He asked, holding my uninjured hand while the doctor worked. It's over, I confirmed. Patricia can't hurt anyone anymore. The legal aftermath took months to resolve. Patricia survived the shooting, but suffered permanent paralysis from the spinal injury. She was charged with attempted murder, terrorist threats, and a dozen other felonies that would keep her in prison for the rest of her life. The psychological evaluation revealed what we'd all suspected. Patricia had developed an obsessive attachment to Marcus that had escalated into homicidal rage when she felt replaced by his wife. Her divorce and financial instability had simply been the final triggers that pushed her over the edge. Marcus struggled with guilt for months, convinced he should have seen the warning signs earlier. But with time and counseling, he came to understand that his mother's mental illness wasn't his fault, and protecting his wife from her violence wasn't a betrayal of family loyalty. 6 months later, I finally had my gallbladder surgery, scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon with Marcus driving me to and from the hospital. No drama, no attempts on my life, just routine medical care followed by a quiet recovery at home. Sometimes I still think about that morning when I kissed Marcus goodbye and walked into the garage, not knowing that my mother-in-law had spent the previous evening planning my death. The randomness of it haunts me. How a simple decision to drive myself to surgery nearly cost me my life, and exposed a level of family dysfunction that could have destroyed everything Marcus and I had built together. But it also showed me something important about love and loyalty. Real love doesn't demand choosing sides. Real love doesn't require sacrificing other relationships. Real love trusts the people you care about to make their own choices, even when those choices don't center around you. Patricia never understood that distinction, and it cost her everything: her freedom, her son's respect, and ultimately her life as she'd known it. The woman who'd tried so desperately to keep her son close had guaranteed he'd never trust her again. The courtroom was packed on the day of Patricia's sentencing. Media attention had turned the case into a cautionary tale about toxic family dynamics and unchecked mental illness. I sat in the front row next to Marcus, my left arm still in a sling from the shoulder surgery that had repaired the damage from Patricia's bullet. Patricia herself looked nothing like the woman who had once criticized my housekeeping while folding laundry with military precision. Prison had aged her dramatically. Her silver hair hung limp and unwashed, and the expensive clothes had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her diminished frame. Judge Margaret Sullivan had reviewed all the evidence, including the psychiatric evaluation that painted a disturbing picture of Patricia's deteriorating mental state over the past 5 years. The obsessive behavior toward Marcus had apparently started long before I'd entered the picture. I was simply the catalyst that pushed her paranoid delusions into homicidal action. "Mrs. Hendricks," Judge Sullivan began, looking directly at Patricia. "In 43 years on the bench, I have rarely encountered a case that demonstrates such premeditated malice disguised as maternal love. Your actions endangered not only your intended victim, but countless innocent civilians." Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the forensic psychiatrist who had evaluated Patricia, had testified that while Patricia suffered from a severe personality disorder with paranoid features, she was fully competent to stand trial and understand the consequences of her actions. The defendant exhibits classic symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder with obsessive-compulsive tendencies, Dr. Martinez had explained during the competency hearing. She constructed an elaborate fantasy in which her son's marriage represented a personal attack on her identity and self-worth. However, her ability to plan the brake sabotage over several weeks demonstrates clear awareness that her actions were illegal and harmful. The prosecution had laid out a timeline that was chilling in its methodical precision. Patricia had researched brake systems online for weeks before her visit to Rodriguez Auto. She'd purchased wire cutters and studied the layout of our garage. She'd even calculated the timing of the sabotage to maximize the likelihood of a fatal crash during rush-hour traffic. Marcus's testimony had been the most difficult part of the trial. My husband had been forced to recount years of increasingly possessive behavior that he'd dismissed as normal motherly concern. Phone calls that came at inappropriate hours. Unexpected visits to check up on our marriage. Comments about my appearance, my career, my worthiness as a daughter-in-law that had gradually escalated from subtle criticism to open hostility. "I thought she was just adjusting to the divorce," Marcus had said from the witness stand, his voice barely audible. "I never imagined she was capable of murder." The defense had attempted to argue temporary insanity, claiming that Patricia's recent divorce and financial stress had triggered a psychotic break. But the evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. The brake sabotage, the escape plan, even the way she'd positioned herself to inherit influence over Marcus after my death. Everything pointed to calculated malice rather than impulsive madness. Linda Morrison, Patricia's sister, had provided testimony that destroyed any remaining sympathy for the defendant. She described Patricia's reaction to news of my survival with chilling detail. She wasn't relieved that Sarah had lived, Linda testified. She was angry that her plan had failed. She kept saying she'd have to be more direct next time, that subtlety was wasted on stubborn people. The victim's impact statements had been emotionally devastating. My parents had flown in from Oregon to describe the trauma of learning their daughter had been targeted for murder by her own mother-in-law. Marcus's colleagues from Roosevelt High School testified about the psychological toll the case had taken on both of us, forcing him to take extended leave while I struggled with PTSD symptoms that made teaching nearly impossible. But it was Marcus's statement that had reduced the courtroom to complete silence. Your Honor, the woman sitting in that defendant's chair is not the mother who raised me. The mother I remember taught me to be kind, to resolve conflicts with words rather than violence, to treat marriage as a partnership rather than a competition. I don't know when she became someone capable of attempted murder, but I know that I can never trust her around my wife or any future children we might have. She has destroyed our family as surely as if she had succeeded in killing Sarah. Now, 6 months after that terrible confrontation in the Desert Ridge parking lot, Judge Sullivan was ready to impose a sentence. Mrs. Patricia Hendricks, you have been found guilty of attempted murder in the first degree, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, criminal damage to property, terrorist threats, and stalking. These crimes were committed against a woman whose only offense was marrying your son and building a life that didn't revolve around your needs and desires. Patricia sat motionless in her wheelchair, the spinal injury from Detective Chen's sniper having left her paralyzed from the waist down. Her lawyer had argued that her medical condition should be considered during sentencing, but the prosecution had countered that her disability didn't diminish the severity of her crimes or the ongoing threat she posed to public safety. The court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the attempted murder charge, with concurrent sentences of 15 years for the aggravated assault, 5 years for criminal damage, and 3 years each for the terrorist threats. And stalking charges. Life without parole. Patricia would die in prison, never again able to manipulate or threaten anyone who dared to love someone she considered her property. As the bailiff prepared to wheel Patricia out of the courtroom, she turned toward Marcus and me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger or hatred, but something far more disturbing. Pity. You'll understand someday, Marcus, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. When you're older, and your wife gets tired of pretending to love you, when she finds someone younger or richer or more exciting, you'll remember that your mother was the only woman who ever loved you unconditionally. It was her final attempt, designed to plant seeds of doubt about our marriage that might grow over time. But Marcus had learned to recognize her psychological warfare for what it was. Goodbye, Mom, he said quietly. I hope you find peace. The aftermath of Patricia's sentencing brought unexpected challenges. Media attention had made us minor celebrities in Phoenix, which meant constant reminders of the trauma whenever we went grocery shopping or tried to have dinner at a restaurant. Strangers would approach with questions about the case or unsolicited advice about family relationships. We decided to start fresh in a new city. Marcus accepted a teaching position at a private school in Denver, and I found work at a middle school that specialized in students with learning disabilities. The change of scenery helped both of us process what we'd been through without constant external reminders. Therapy became a regular part of our routine. Dr. Angela Foster helped us understand how Patricia's manipulation had affected our relationship in ways we hadn't even recognized. The constant criticism disguised as concern had created insecurities that lingered long after Patricia's imprisonment. Victims of psychological abuse often struggle with self-doubt even after the abuser is removed from their lives, Dr. Foster explained during one of our joint sessions. Patricia spent months undermining Sarah's confidence and sense of belonging in the marriage. That kind of damage takes time to heal. Marcus struggled with guilt over his failure to protect me from his mother's escalating behavior. He'd replay conversations and incidents from the months before the brake sabotage, looking for warning signs he should have recognized. She asked about our insurance policies, he'd say for the 100th time. She wanted to know about our wills, our emergency contacts, our medical directives. How did I not see what she was planning? But Dr. Foster helped him understand that Patricia's manipulation had been sophisticated and deliberate. She'd exploited his natural love and loyalty as a son to create blind spots that prevented him from seeing her true intentions. Predators are skilled at identifying and exploiting their victims' psychological vulnerabilities, she explained. Patricia used Marcus's desire to be a good son as a weapon against both of you. 2 years after Patricia's conviction, we received news that changed everything. She had died in prison from complications related to her spinal injury and a heart condition that had gone undiagnosed during her years of hiding her deteriorating mental health. The prison chaplain who called to notify us said Patricia had never expressed remorse for her crimes, but she had spent her final months writing letters to Marcus that the prison had refused to deliver due to the no-contact order. She asked me to tell you that she forgives you for choosing your wife over your mother, the chaplain said, apparently unaware of how twisted that message sounded. Even in death, Patricia was trying to rewrite history to cast herself as the victim, and Marcus as the ungrateful son who had abandoned her. It was a final reminder of why the no-contact order had been necessary, and why we'd been right to start our new life far away from the toxicity she represented. Marcus grieved for the mother he'd lost long before her actual death. The woman who had raised him with love before mental illness and obsession had transformed her into something dangerous and unrecognizable. But he didn't grieve for the woman who had tried to murder his wife and destroy his marriage. Today, 4 years after that morning when I kissed Marcus goodbye and walked into a trap designed to kill me, we have a different life than the one we'd originally planned. We live in a modest house in Denver with a view of the Rocky Mountains. Marcus coaches the debate team at his school and has found peace in helping teenagers develop critical thinking skills. I work with students who need extra support and patience, drawing on my own experience of overcoming trauma to help them succeed. We're expecting our first child in December, a daughter we've already decided to name Hope. Patricia will never meet her granddaughter, never have the opportunity to poison another generation with her toxic definition of love and loyalty. Sometimes people ask if we're afraid the story will repeat itself, if our daughter might someday face similar threats from someone who can't accept healthy boundaries in relationships. But we've learned to recognize the warning signs of obsessive behavior and manipulation. We know the difference between love and possession, between caring and controlling. Most importantly, we know that real love doesn't require choosing sides. Real love doesn't demand the sacrifice of other relationships. Real love trusts people to make their own choices and supports them even when those choices don't center around us. Patricia never learned that lesson, and it cost her everything. But her destructive legacy taught us something valuable about the kind of family we want to build. One based on respect, trust, and genuine care rather than manipulation, guilt, and control. The brake lines in my Honda were severed with surgical precision, but the damage Patricia inflicted on our family's trust took much longer to repair. In the end, though, surviving her attempt on my life made our marriage stronger and our commitment to each other deeper. We learned that love worth having is love worth defending, even when the threat comes from within your own family. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.